in 1940. When millions were desperately trying to escape the Nazi death machine, one man fought to get in. He deliberately entered Auschwitz for 945 days, built a resistance army 1,000 men strong, documented the Holocaust as it unfolded, and accomplished what the world thought impossible. In addition, he escaped to tell the truth. His name was Witold Pilecki, and his story remained buried for decades. Not because he failed, but because he succeeded too well, and some truths were too dangerous to be told. This is the most extraordinary spy mission in human history. Witold Pilecki was born in 1901 in Oleander, then part of the Russian Empire. Like many Poles, his family nurtured a fierce independence streak despite living under foreign rule. By age 17, as World War I reshuffled Europe's borders, Pilecki was already fighting, first against Germans, then against invading Soviet forces. In the Polish-Soviet War of 1919 to 1921, Pilecki distinguished himself as a cavalry officer helping to secure Poland's fragile independence. When the fighting ended, he did something remarkable for a military man. He chose peace. Settling in the countryside near Sukoce, Pilecki married Maria, had 2 children, and became a gentleman farmer and community leader. He wrote poetry, painted, and believed in a bright future for independent Poland. That peaceful interlude ended abruptly on September 1st, 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded from the west. Pilecki, now a reserve officer, immediately rejoined his cavalry unit, riding out against German tanks in what would become one of history's most lopsided battles. Within weeks, Poland was crushed between Hitler's Germany and Stalin's Soviet Union. Warsaw lay in ruins. The Nazis began systematic destruction of Polish society, arresting intellectuals, military officers, and community leaders. But in the shadow of defeat, resistance was already forming. Pilecki immediately joined the underground, helping create the secret Polish army. Unlike many resistance fighters who fled to continue the fight from abroad, Pilecki chose to remain in occupied Poland, a decision that would soon lead him to make an even more fateful choice. By early 1940, disturbing rumors spread through Warsaw about a new camp the Germans had established near the town of Auschwitz in German. Polish army officers, professors, doctors, and resistance members were being sent there. Few returned. The Polish underground needed intelligence. What exactly was happening at Auschwitz? How many guards? What weapons did they have? Was a rescue operation possible? In a decision that still astonishes historians, Pilecki, a husband and father of 2 young children, volunteered for an impossible mission: to be deliberately captured and sent to Auschwitz as a prisoner. Pilecki's superiors in the resistance initially rejected his plan as suicidal. It took weeks of persuasion before they finally approved his mission, giving him a false identity as Tomasz Serafiński to use after capture. Pilecki meticulously prepared his cover identity. He memorized the details of Tomasz Serafiński's life, a real person whose documents had been recovered after his death. He arranged recognition signals and contact procedures for the underground, and he waited for his opportunity. On September 19, 1940, during a massive roundup in Warsaw's Żoliborz district, Witold Pilecki did the unthinkable. He deliberately walked into the Nazi dragnet, ensuring his capture. 2 days later, he arrived at Auschwitz. Stripped of his clothes, his hair, and his name, he became prisoner, number 4859. The gates closed behind him as he entered what he would later describe as another planet where the normal laws of life were suspended. His mission had begun. The Auschwitz that Pilecki entered in 1940 was not yet the industrialized death factory it would become. In these early days, it primarily held Polish political prisoners, with Jews making up a smaller percentage of the population. But it was already a place of systematic terror. From his first day, Pilecki experienced calculated dehumanization. Head shaved, possessions taken, stripped naked, and assigned a number, prisoners were reduced to anonymous units of forced labor. Death came in many forms. The brutal roll calls could last for hours in freezing temperatures. Prisoners who collapsed were beaten. Work assignments in the gravel pit or construction sites drove men to exhaustion, then death. Starvation rations slowly weakened even the strongest. In his first weeks at Auschwitz, Pilecki lost nearly 40 pounds. He later wrote that the camp was designed to break a man within 3 months, through hunger, cold, arbitrary punishment, and the constant threat of death. In his reports, Pilecki wrote, "Every 10 minutes, someone would collapse from exhaustion or be beaten to death by guards. The bodies would be loaded onto carts, stacked like firewood. By spring of 1941, average survival time after arrival was 2 weeks." Despite this horror, or perhaps because of it, Pilecki never lost sight of his mission. Meticulously, he began mapping the camp, counting guards, noting schedules, and most importantly, looking for allies. His resistance work had taught him to recognize potential recruits, not through overt discussion, but through small acts that revealed character. Who shared their bread? Who helped others stand during roll call? Who maintained dignity despite degradation? These were the men Pilecki needed. In December 1940, after carefully observing his fellow prisoners, Pilecki approached his first recruit, a former Polish army officer. His pitch was simple but profound. "We are not going to passively await death. We are going to organize resistance." With cold calculation, Pilecki built his network using a cell structure of 5 men. Each knew only 4 others, limiting damage if someone broke under torture. Different cells served different purposes: intelligence gathering, sabotage, food distribution, communication. Pilecki named his organization Związek Organizacji Wojskowej, ZOW, the Military Organization Union. By 1942, it included several hundred members from all prisoner categories and backgrounds. The ZOW accomplished remarkable feats right under Nazi noses. They infiltrated key camp positions, the hospital, kitchens, warehouses, administrative offices, allowing them to redirect food, alter records to protect endangered prisoners, and gather intelligence. Sabotage became an art form. Weapons manufactured in the camp were subtly damaged. Construction materials were compromised. There were even plans to spread typhus-infected lice among the SS guards, biological warfare born of desperation. Most critically, Pilecki's network smuggled in radio parts to build receivers. Hidden in the camp, these allowed prisoners to hear Allied war news, providing crucial hope that sustained many through their darkest moments. And Pilecki documented everything: names, dates, numbers, each new atrocity, each evolution of the camp's deadly purpose. By mid-1942, Pilecki witnessed Auschwitz transform from a concentration camp into an extermination center. Massive new facilities were constructed at nearby Birkenau. Rail lines were extended directly into the camp. Gas chambers and crematoria operated day and night. The scale of killing expanded beyond anything he could have imagined. Trainloads of Jews began arriving from across occupied Europe. Most were sent directly to the gas chambers without ever entering the camp. Those selected for labor faced a slow death through work. Pilecki's mission gained new urgency. The world needed to know what was happening, but getting information out required ingenuity, courage, and luck. Pilecki's greatest achievement may have been his determination to document Nazi crimes in precise, undeniable detail. But creating these reports was only half the challenge. They had to reach the outside world. The messages traveled along a precarious chain, from prisoner to civilian worker, to underground courier, to radio operator, to London, where the Polish government in exile maintained contact with the resistance. Pilecki's first complete report reached London in March 1941, just 6 months after his infiltration. It was among the earliest reliable accounts of what was happening inside the Nazi concentration camp system. In London, Pilecki's reports met with skepticism. The systematic killing he described seemed too organized, too industrial, too horrific to be believable. Some officials suspected exaggeration, others were simply overwhelmed by the implications. Pilecki's reports arrived as the Allies were focused on military strategy, not humanitarian intervention. The suffering of camp prisoners, however horrific, was not a strategic priority compared to defeating German forces on the battlefield. But Pilecki persisted, sending increasingly detailed information and pleading for action. By early 1943, after gathering intelligence for over 900 days, Pilecki reached a critical decision. Reports alone weren't enough. He needed to deliver his testimony in person to forcefully advocate for military action against the camp. With the assistance of 2 comrades, Jan Redze and Edward Cisielski, he began planning something as dangerous as his entry: escape. On the night of April 26, 1943, during a midnight shift at the camp bakery, the 3 men made their move. They overpowered the capo's supervisor, cut telephone lines, and forced a rear door that led outside the camp perimeter. As air raid sirens conveniently wailed, they slipped into the darkness, leaving behind hell, but carrying its memory with them. The next hours were critical. Camp procedure dictated that escapees must be recaptured within 3 hours, or nearby units would be notified. They outlasted the clock. What followed was a harrowing 100-mile journey through Nazi-occupied territory. On foot, without proper shoes, their bodies weakened by years of malnutrition, they nonetheless kept moving, driven by the urgency of their witness. Upon reaching Warsaw, Pilecki immediately began composing his most comprehensive testimony. For days he wrote, producing a 100-page report that included detailed maps of Auschwitz-Birkenau, names of key SS officers and their schedules, precise estimates of deaths, over 1.5 million by his count, locations of gas chambers and crematoria, and, most importantly, a military plan to liberate the camp. After 2.5 years inside hell, Pilecki believed he had accomplished his mission. Now the world would act. He was wrong. Pilecki's testimony, combined with his detailed reports from inside Auschwitz, provided the Allies with something unprecedented: a blueprint for intervention and a first-hand account of genocide from a military observer. His plan was audacious but practical: coordinated airdrops of weapons to the resistance network inside the camp, combined with attacks by the Polish Home Army from outside. The prisoner underground was ready to rise up if given the means. Allied commanders considered and rejected the plan. Some argued the camp was beyond effective bomber range. Others questioned whether prisoners could effectively use dropped weapons. Most significantly, military planners were focused on conventional battlefield victories, not humanitarian rescue operations. In a bitter irony, Allied aircraft would eventually fly bombing missions against industrial targets less than 5 miles from Auschwitz. Yet the camp itself remained untouched. The gas chambers continued operating until November 1944. Despite this crushing disappointment, Pilecki continued fighting. When the Warsaw uprising erupted in August 1944, he commanded a resistance company in fierce street battles against Nazi forces, once again displaying extraordinary courage. The uprising failed after 63 days of fighting. Warsaw was systematically destroyed by German forces as punishment. Pilecki once again survived, escaping to continue resistance activities from the countryside. In January 1945, Soviet forces pushed the Germans out of Poland. For many Poles, liberation quickly revealed itself as a new occupation. The Soviet-backed communist government began consolidating power, targeting non-communist resistance fighters as enemies. For men like Pilecki, the war was not over. It had merely entered a new phase. As World War II ended, Poland fell under Soviet control. Free elections promised at the Yalta Conference were replaced by communist single-party rule. The Polish government in exile in London was delegitimized. Former resistance heroes became enemies of the state. Refusing exile, Pilecki accepted one final dangerous mission, gathering intelligence on Soviet atrocities and the communist takeover. Under the cover identity of Roman Jezierski, he documented forced disappearances, rigged elections, and NKVD interrogation methods. Between 1945 and 1947, over 50,000 former Polish resistance fighters were arrested by communist authorities. Many were executed or disappeared into Soviet gulags. Pilecki was documenting these purges when he was caught. On May 8, 1947, his luck ran out. Communist security forces arrested Pilecki at his Warsaw apartment. The man who had voluntarily entered Auschwitz, who had survived the unimaginable, was now branded an enemy of the people by Poland's new rulers. For 8 months, he was tortured brutally. His fingernails were torn out, his ribs were broken, his nose was shattered. Sleep deprivation and starvation weakened his body. Yet even his communist interrogators later admitted with grudging respect he was harder to break than most. His trial was a Soviet-style spectacle with a predetermined outcome. The charges read like Orwellian fiction: foreign imperialism, espionage, illegal border crossing, possession of illegal radio equipment, military preparations for overthrow of the state. The man who had risked everything to expose Nazi genocide was now accused of being a Nazi collaborator, perhaps the cruelest charge of all. When permitted to speak, Pilecki was characteristically direct. I tried to live my life such that in the hour of my death I would feel joy rather than fear. When asked about Auschwitz compared to his communist imprisonment, he replied simply, "Auschwitz was child's play by comparison." Pilecki was given a rare opportunity to accept a pardon in exchange for informing on his colleagues. He refused immediately, saying, "I cannot betray my friends or my principles." On March 15, 1948, Witold Pilecki was sentenced to death. His final words to his wife Maria during their last prison visit were both a farewell and a testament. "I have been trying to live my life such that in the hour of my death, I would rather feel joy than fear." On May 25, 1948, in the basement of Warsaw's Mokotów prison, Witold Pilecki faced his executioners. Unlike in Auschwitz, there would be no escape this time. According to prison records, he refused a blindfold. A single shot to the back of the head ended the life of one of World War II's greatest heroes. His body was buried in an unmarked grave, its location still unknown today. The communists attempted to erase not just his life, but his very memory. For nearly 40 years, mentioning Pilecki's name in Poland could result in imprisonment. His reports were classified, his photographs were removed from archives, his story was suppressed as thoroughly as any in modern history. The truth, however, proved more resilient than the lie. With the fall of communism in 1989, Pilecki's story began to re-emerge. Historians gained access to classified files. His family could finally speak openly. The full measure of his courage came into focus. In 1990, the democratic Polish government posthumously exonerated Pilecki of all charges. In 2006, he received Poland's highest honor, the Order of the White Eagle. Today, Pilecki is finally receiving recognition as one of history's most extraordinary heroes. His reports provide crucial first-hand evidence of the Holocaust. Schools in Poland now teach his story. Streets bear his name. The man the Nazis could not break and the Soviets could not erase has returned to history. The most remarkable aspect of Pilecki's story may be this. Despite witnessing the worst of humanity, he never lost faith in the best of humanity. His final letters from prison speak not of hatred or vengeance, but of forgiveness and hope for a better world. Remember his name, Witold Pilecki, the volunteer who walked into hell to tell the world what he saw. Kindly like and subscribe for more.